The cormorant still smelled of ozone when the Ledgerkin shuttle docked, and Inspector Senar came aboard before the scorch marks on Deck 2 had finished cooling. I was the one who built the core, so I was the one they wanted to see first. The Ledgerkin economy runs on emberstones, rationed crystal cells that every household, every ship, every city on their worlds has to requisition through a cast of catalogers. Senar was one of those. Tall, gray-skinned, 4 pale eyes set in a face built for reading ledgers, not weather. He stood in the engineering bay with the twin suns of the system pouring through the reinforced viewports, throwing his shadow long and thin across the deck plates, and he looked at what was left of my workbench like it had personally insulted him. "You will explain the explosion," he said. "There's nothing to explain. The core overloaded because someone bypassed the dampening coil. I didn't do it, and I don't think you did either." I'd already walked the wreckage twice that morning, on my knees in the soot with a hand torch, looking at the coil housing. It had been pried open, not blown open. Someone had wanted the bay to look like negligence, and they'd known enough about the system to fake it convincingly. I didn't say any of that to Senar yet. A man who arrives already certain of your guilt doesn't listen any better for being handed evidence he never asked for. "The compact will determine fault. 3 of your crew have already given statements suggesting negligence on your part. A 4th suggests sabotage. Either is a chargeable offense under the survey treaty. Then let them charge me with whichever one they can prove. What I require of you, Inspector, is the calibration key." He'd corrected himself before I had the chance to. That told me how this visit was going to go. He meant the brass one, small enough to close my fist around, 3 notches filed into the handle where my thumb sat when I turned it. I'd made it myself 11 months ago, the week the core first ran clean, and I'd never let it out of my pocket since. It didn't look like much. A machinist's tool. The kind you'd find in any drawer on any ship. That was the point. I should explain what the core actually did, because Senar's people never quite believed it until they saw the numbers themselves. We'd found a way to pull current straight out of tellurite ore, the cheapest, most common rock in the quadrant, by driving it through resonance until it cavitated along the molecular seam. No fuel cycle, no waste stream. A child could mine the ore with a handpick. The only hard part was tuning the resonance frequency precisely enough that the core didn't shake itself apart, and that tuning drifted, by fractions of a hertz, from one unit to the next, every single time. Every core needed its own key. Every key needed its own notches, filed by hand against that one core's drift, checked against a vibration plate, until the depth matched to a fraction most instruments couldn't even read, let alone reproduce. Senar's people had scanned 6 of our reactors in as many weeks. They had the schematics, copied down to the rivet. They had the ore, stockpiled in a warehouse on their home moon. What they didn't have was a single core that ran for more than 4 minutes before it screamed itself apart, because they kept trying to mass-produce the key instead of hand-fitting it, the same way they mass-produced everything else that mattered to them. "The compact has determined," Senar said, "that uncontrolled distribution of this technology constitutes a destabilization event. Emberstone markets across 9 systems have already shown contraction. 2 refineries on Tessic Vale have suspended operation. You will surrender the core and the calibration key, and the compact will catalog them appropriately." Catalog. That was the word they used for things they intended to bury. I didn't raise my voice. There wasn't any use in it, and there wasn't any fear in it either. Not by then. I'd had 11 months to get used to men like Senar, standing in doorways with that particular look on their face, the one that says they've already filed the paperwork on you, and are only waiting for you to catch up to it. "This core cannot be copied," I told him. "Not by scan, not by formula, not by 100 of your best engineers standing over it with calipers. It has to be tuned by a hand that built it, against drift only that hand can feel. That is a claim. The compact does not catalog claims, it catalogs results. Then take the key and find out." I held it out flat on my palm. 3 notches, worn smooth at the edges from a year of my thumb riding over them. He looked at it the way you'd look at a door you already suspected was locked, then took it from me with 2 long fingers, careful not to touch my skin, like decency itself was a contaminant he didn't want carried home. They took the key anyway. They took the core too, hauled it out through the hangar doors on a grav sled and into the brightness of the docking yard, past the wreck of Deck 2 still roped off with hazard tape, and for 3 days, the cormorant sat quiet under that system's relentless double sun, while I waited to find out whether I'd just handed them the keys to my own funeral. My crew kept asking what I thought would happen. I told them the truth, which was that I didn't know, and that not knowing was the whole point of having let go of it. On the second night, my second-in-command asked why I hadn't cut a duplicate key in secret, just in case. I told her that the moment I built a spare was the moment the key stopped being mine. It would just be a part, like any other, and parts could be stolen. What couldn't be stolen was the year of work behind it, and that, at least, no one could take out through the hangar doors on a sled. On the 4th day, Senar came back without an escort, which told me something before he said a single word. The core had run for 90 seconds before the resonance drifted out from under the key's notches, and the whole assembly had to be shut down by hand to keep it from tearing itself open. Their best calibration techs had recut the notches twice, matching every measurement I'd given them down to the micron, recording each pass with instruments more precise than anything on my bench. The drift moved anyway, because the drift wasn't in the metal. It was in the months I'd spent listening to that specific core hum under my hands, while I filed, stopped, tested, filed again, until the notch depth wasn't a number anymore. It was a memory my hands had, the way a man's grip remembers the exact give of a door he's opened 10,000 times without ever once thinking about it. The compact requests, Senar said, and I noted the word requests, new in his mouth where demands had always lived before. A recalibration. I'll need the key back. He set it on the bench between us without ceremony. 3 notches, a little duller now from someone else's clumsy attempt to read them with a scanner instead of a thumb. I picked it up and turned it once in the light, just to feel the old grooves under my own skin again, then looked at him standing there with his ledger eyes and his 9 destabilized systems, and his compact that cataloged everything except the one thing that actually mattered. You can have as many cores as you want, I said. I'll build them myself, and I'll train anyone you send me, properly, with their hands on the file. But every core needs a key cut by a living hand that stays with it for as long as it runs. You don't get to mass-produce the part of this that has to be earned. He didn't answer the way I expected. He didn't argue it either. He stood there a long moment in the daylight, slanting through the viewport, turning the idea over the way his people turned over numbers, looking for the column it belonged in, and not finding one. Then he said the word that mattered. Acceptable. That was the whole negotiation, in the end. 9 systems worth of rationed power, decided in a sentence, because the only thing that had ever actually frightened the compact wasn't the energy itself. It was the discovery that something this valuable couldn't be taken from us, only made, slowly, by hand, by someone willing to stay with it long after the filing was done. I still carry that key, different notches now, cut for a different core on a different ship, but the same 3 grooves worn into the same place on the handle, where my thumb has learned, all over again, exactly where to sit.